Hello, I'm Holly and welcome to one of the most exciting videos that I have ever made, and that is my announcement for my book club in 2023. I've been thinking about doing this for quite a few months, and this book club is going to be focused on Gothic classics, and if it ends up being a success and goes on for many years, it will just go into Gothic books as we look at more modern takes on the Gothic genre. But let's start off with what this is called. So right now I've just called it the Novel Curiosity Book Club. I know it's very boring, but I couldn't really think of anything else that kind of, I don't know, got the vibe, because I already feel like my name, Novel Curiosity, has those like oldie, gothic-y vibes, you know, like an old curiosity shop or something along those lines. So I thought that it fit the type of book that I wanted to read. And first of all, if you're unsure what a gothic book is, I do have a definition, and I'm just going to read this out because this just explains it better than I probably could, and this is by Patrick Kennedy. I will leave a link to the article where he makes his definition. This isn't mine, I have taken it from someone else, but this is what they say. In the most general terms, Gothic literature can be defined as writing that employs dark and picturesque scenery, startling and melodramatic narrative devices, and an overall atmosphere of exoticism, mystery, fear and dread. Often a Gothic novel or story will revolve around a large, ancient house that conceals a terrible secret or serves as the refuge of an especially frightening and threatening character. Despite the fairly common use of this bleak motif, Gothic writers have also used supernatural elements, touches of romance, well-known historical characters, and travel and adventure narratives to entertain their readers. So the Gothic genre was apparently developed during the Romantic period in Britain, and the first mention of the word Gothic in relation to literature was in the subtitle of the book written by Horace Walpole, which is The Castle of Otranto. This will be the first book, but I will get into the schedule in a sec. I just wanted to go over some ground rules first. The first thing is that we will be reading one book either every month or every other month. Quite a few of these first books that I want to read are pretty short. They're only about 200 pages, so even though they are a classic, I think most people could easily read them within 1 month. But there are a few chunkier ones that we will talk about as well, and those ones will be bi-monthly, so you'll have 2 months to read those. And I do have a schedule that I will run through to let you know which ones are just for 1 month, which ones are for 2 months, and I will also leave that schedule in the description so you can either make a note of it or come back to this video and check. And there will be a Discord server. I have no experience of creating a Discord, but I will try my very best. I have used a few in the past, and if you're unfamiliar with that, it is a free chat room kind of thing, and I just wanted to make it clear that this book club is entirely for fun rather than an academic thing. I know that a lot of people are a little bit scared of classics and they don't want to do this huge exploration of them, which is perfectly fine. I completely understand that, and I know that classics can be a little bit challenging, and I will probably draw some questions up that are more about, you know, the historical importance of the books or the historical setting. We could discuss a little bit of that as well, but this is going to just be like an entirely chill, fun thing. Don't put any pressure on yourself. If no one joins me, I'm perfectly fine with that, but I do think I might also do live shows in addition to having the Discord chats, but that entirely depends on how many people join this book club. If it is just me and like 2 other people, maybe not, but if more people do decide to join, I might also do some live shows at the end of each month or the beginning of the next month just to discuss the book, see whether you enjoyed it, whether you didn't. I know that the ratings on some of these books on Goodreads are a little bit low, which is a little bit worrying, but I want to see what I think, and I want to really delve into the beginnings of the Gothic genre, and that leads into the first phase of the book club, or as I like to call it, chapter 1, which is Castles, Forbidden Romance and Evil Monks. Those seem to be some common motifs in the books that I've selected, and these first selection of of books for the first year and a half are very much right from the beginning. These are the foundations of the Gothic genre, and most of these come from the 18th century and the early 19th century. This is by no means a complete tour through Gothic literature. There were quite a few books that I haven't included, but I have tried to include some of the most influential, the most well-known, and I have also tried to include books from a range of locations. So there are some that are written by British authors, American authors, German authors, both male and female authors, and I will also mention that because these are classics, a lot of these are available on a website called Project Gutenberg, which is a great initiative where volunteers essentially create ebooks of classic books that are available for free through ebooks or just through their website, so I will link that in the description. And this first phase of the book club also will not include any of the probably more famous Gothic classics like Dracula, Frankenstein, all of that kind of thing. That will come in phase 2 if this book club is successful. This first section is really just to see the books that started off this genre, that created the backbone of some of the tropes that were later used by those authors in the 18th century and the 19th century. And I think, without further ado, we should just get straight into the schedule. In January, we will be reading The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. This is seen as the first Gothic book. I think there were a few books in medieval times that could be considered Gothic in tone, but this is like the OG Gothic classic, and of course it had to be the first one for the book club. I'll just read you the little blurb on the back for this one. The Castle of Otranto is the first supernatural English novel and one of the most influential works of Gothic fiction. It inaugurated a literary genre that will be forever associated with the effects that Walpole pioneered. Professing to be a translation of a mysterious Italian tale from the darkest Middle Ages, the novel tells of Manfred, Prince of Otranto, whose fear of an ancient prophecy sets him on a course of destruction. After the grotesque death of his only son Conrad on his wedding day, Manfred determines to marry the bride-to-be. The Virgin Isabella flees through a castle riddled with secret passages. Chilling coincidences, ghostly visitations, arcane revelations, and violent combat combine in a heady mix that terrifies the novel's first readers. So there you have it, a castle setting, some supernatural entities. I'm very excited to read this one and just see the origins of the Gothic novel. In February, we will be reading The Old English Baron by Clara Reeve. This one is said to be heavily influenced by The Castle of Otranto, but it tried to add some more believability. I think The Castle of Otranto is a little bit wild and out there, and this one tried to do a similar thing, but definitely ground it more in reality. And in this one, you're following a man called Sir Philip Harclay, who returns to England after a long absence to find that his childhood friend Arthur Lord Lovell is no longer alive, and the castles and estates of the Lovell family have twice changed hands. But a mysteriously abandoned set of rooms in the Castle of Lovell promises to disclose the secrets of the past. After a series of frantic episodes and surprising revelations, culminating in a trial by combat, the crimes of the usurper and the legitimacy of the true heir are finally discovered. In March, we will be reading The Castle of Wolfenbach by Eliza Parsons. This is the first book on this list that was mentioned in Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which is a book that we will be reading. I will get into that in a minute. But in Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, that's kind of a satire on the Gothic genre. She mentioned a few books that the main character had read. This one was one of them. We won't be reading all of the books that she mentioned in this book club yet. We could always return to them in the future, but there are quite a few. But this one definitely stood out to me because in this one you're following Matilda Weimar, who flees her lecherous and incestuous uncle and seeks refuge in the ancient castle of Wolfenbach. Among the castle's abandoned chambers, Matilda will discover the horrifying mystery of the missing Countess of Wolfenbach. But when her uncle tracks her down, can she escape his despicable intentions? It just sounds very fun to me. Very castle, mysterious. I am very intrigued to try this one. In April and May, we will be reading our first Anne Radcliffe, and that is The Mysteries of Udolpho. Anne Radcliffe was a pioneer of the Gothic genre, and we just had to include her. She is just one of the most well-known writers in this genre at the time, and she has written a lot of books before this one, but I was a little bit worried that if we read all of her books, this would just become an Anne Radcliffe book club, which sounds fun, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So we aren't going to be reading all of her books yet, but again, if this book club does become successful, we could always go back and read some of her earlier works. But this one, The Mysteries of Udolpho, is quite chunky, but we are going to be reading this one over 2 months. And in this one, you're following orphaned heroine Emily St. Aubert, who finds herself imprisoned in her evil guardian Count Montoni's gloomy medieval fortress in the remote Apennines. Terror is the order of the day inside the walls of Udolpho as Emily struggles against Montoni's rapacious schemes and the threat of her own psychological disintegration. Intriguing. In June, we will be reading The Necromancer, or The Tale of the Black Forest by Karl Friedrich Kahlert, and this one is a German, Prussian. It's a bit difficult to say exactly because obviously, you know, country lines have changed, but this one is from that area of the world. This one is also one that was mentioned in Northanger Abbey, and it was said to have a major influence on later Gothic writers, especially the writer of The Monk. And this one is a series of interconnected stories, all centering on the enigmatic figure of Volkert the Necromancer, filled with murder, ghosts, and dark magic, and featuring a delirious and dizzying plot that almost defies comprehension. It is described as one of the strangest horror novels ever written. In July, we will be tackling The Monk by Matthew Gregory Lewis, and this one is quite famous in the Gothic genre because this one pretty much shocked the nation when it came out. I'm pretty sure it's probably been banned a few times because of the content of this one, and this one is following a monk called Ambrosio, who is torn between his spiritual vows and the temptations of physical pleasure. His internal battle leads to sexual obsession, rape and murder, yet this book also contains knowing parody of its own excesses as well as social comedy. The Monk was considered quite a groundbreaking novel in the Gothic horror genre as opposed to Gothic romance, which Anne Radcliffe tended to write. It's full of bloodshed and sex and scandal, and I cannot wait to get to this one and see what I think. Following that, in August and September, this is another book that is going to be read over 2 months. We have The Italian by Anne Radcliffe, the second Anne Radcliffe on this list. This one was apparently written in response to The Monk because Anne Radcliffe wasn't happy with where Gothic books were going. She didn't want them to have this violence in them, so she wrote The Italian instead, and this one also follows an evil monk. From the first moment, Vincentio de Vivaldi, a young nobleman, sets eyes on the veiled figure of Elena. He is captivated by her enigmatic beauty and grace. But his haughty and manipulative mother is against the match and enlists the help of her confessor to come between them. Scudoni, previously a leading figure of the Inquisition, is a demonic, scheming monk with no qualms about the task, whether it entails abduction, torture, or even murder. So it seems like it's very similar to The Monk, but maybe a little bit toned down in the violence, but who knows. Evil monks, forbidden romance. I, again, am very excited to read this one. In October, we will be reading Wieland by Charles Brockden Brown. This is by an American author, and it is said to differ from previous Gothic books in its use of science. So this is like bringing in that scientific element and late Enlightenment ideas, and this was said to be very influential on people like Mary Shelley, obviously, who later wrote Frankenstein. And in Wieland or Wieland, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, I will definitely check that. You are following a man called Theodore Wieland who hears mysterious voices. But are these the results of delusions, ventriloquism, or divine forces? In this Gothic thriller, Charles Brockden Brown portrays a man beset by religious guilt, which erupts into mania, transforming him into the murderer of his wife and children. Once the mystery of the controlling voices is revealed, Theodore's sister Clara undergoes her own transformation as she moves from bitterness and despair over her brother's destruction to resignation and finally peace. And then in November we will be reading Zofloya by Charlotte Dacre. Zofloya is a tale of lust, betrayal and multiple murder set in Venice in the last days of the 15th century. The novel follows Victoria's progress from spoilt daughter of indulgent aristocrats through a period of abuse and captivity to a career of deepening criminality conducted under Satan's watchful eye. One of the most well-known bits about this book is Victoria's intense sexual attraction to her servant, so there might be sapphic elements within this, which I am very intrigued to see because obviously that must have been very controversial at the time. This is one that I've had my eye on for a while, so I'm very excited to get to this one with the book club. In December of 2023 we are going to have a bit of a break. I don't want to read anything too heavy in December. I love just having really light and fun reads for Christmas, so in December we're having a bit of a break, and then in January we are coming back and we are going to be reading 2 novellas by Percy Bysshe Shelley, which are called Zastrozzi and St. Irvine, or the Rosicrucian. I'm sorry if I've pronounced that wrong, but I thought that we would read both of these novellas because they are both pretty short. I think they're about 90 to 100 pages each, and Shelley is an author that I've wanted to try for a while. I know that he is more well known for his poetry, but when I saw that he had some Gothic books out there that used a lot of the Gothic tropes, I thought that they would be perfect to read in the book club. The Goodreads descriptions of these 2 books don't have much information, but Zastrozzi seems to be a forbidden love story. There seems to be a castle, so it is definitely using a lot of those common Gothic tropes. And then St. Irvine, I have no clue because all Goodreads has is a little quote from the book, so I thought that I would read that because I do think it gives you some idea of what kind of book this is. Cavigny quaffed the liquor to the dregs. The cup fell from his trembling hand. The chill dew of death sat upon his forehead. In terrific convulsion he fell headlong, and inarticulately uttering "I am poisoned," sank seemingly lifeless on the earth. 60 robbers at once rushed forward to raise him, and reclining in their arms with a horrible and harrowing shriek, the spark of life fled from his body for ever. A robber, skilled in surgery, opened a vein, but no blood followed the touch of the lancet. Wulfstein advanced to the body, unappalled by the crime which he had committed. In February of 2024, we will be reading The Devil's Elixirs by E.T.A. Hoffman. This is the author of The Nutcracker, and apparently he was also a huge influence on writers like Edgar Allan Poe, so again, I thought that it would be a good one to fit into the book club. This one also follows a monk, but I don't think he is an evil one this time. So it says, the charismatic monk Medardus becomes implicated in a deadly mystery against his will. As he travels towards Rome, he wrestles with the enigma of his own identity while pursued by his murderous doppelganger. The monk's only hope for salvation lies with the beautiful Aurelie, but in order to escape the curse which lies over his family, he must evade the sinister powers of the living and the dead. And then finally, to finish off phase 1 or chapter 1 of the book club, in March 2024, we will be reading Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This one is often considered a Gothic parody rather than a traditional Gothic novel, but I thought that it would be fun to include it, knowing by this point we will have read so many books with the tropes in. And this one follows this girl who I think has this very active imagination, and one day she is invited to go to Northanger Abbey, and because she is this huge fan of Gothic fiction, she essentially inserts herself into that kind of thing and portrays herself as being part of this Gothic novel, and it just sounds like it would be the perfect book to finish off this first phase of the book club. And there you have it. That is phase 1 of the book club. After we've read those books, if it is successful by that point, that schedule could definitely change, but if we have got to that point, we will be taking a couple of months off, and then in June we will be starting phase 2, and that one will start with Frankenstein. So that second phase is more of the ones that that maybe you're more familiar with, Frankenstein, Dracula, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, all that kind of thing. So if you are more interested in maybe reading those, you can always wait until I get to that phase. But I would love if just a couple of people join me on this gothic adventure. I am so excited to read all of these books and just explore this type of book more, because I think that I love gothic books, but reading all of these is definitely going to show me if I am absolutely in love with this genre. But that is it for today's video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and to everyone out there, stay curious. Bye!